She said it while rinsing a coffee mug, not looking at me, just standing at the sink, water running, voice flat. I need you to stay at the Marriott this weekend. I turned from the kitchen table where I'd been reading the paper. I'm sorry. My sister's flying in from Portland, her and her husband. My brother's coming too with the kids. It's a whole thing. She set the mug on the drying rack. It'll be easier if you're not here. I sat with that for a moment. Easier. Like I was a piece of furniture that didn't match the room anymore. This is my house, I said. I know that. She finally turned around. Her expression wasn't unkind exactly. It was something worse, patient. Like she was explaining something to someone slow. But you know how my family is. My sister still hasn't forgiven you for what happened at Christmas. My brother takes her side on everything. I just don't want the weekend to turn into a whole thing. What happened at Christmas was 2 years ago. I apologized. I know you did. And she never acknowledged it. That's just how she is. I looked at my wife, 62 years old, the woman I'd been married to for 31 years, and I tried to remember the last time she'd said, "That's just how he is about me." In my defense, to her family, I couldn't find it. How long? I asked. Just Friday night through Sunday afternoon. 3 days. I nodded slowly. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I folded the newspaper, stood up, and walked to the back bedroom where I kept my old duffel bag on the closet shelf. She called after me, her voice lighter now, relieved. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." I didn't answer that either. I checked into the Marriott on Route 9 that Friday afternoon. Room 214, 2 queen beds, a view of the parking structure, a coffee maker with those little foil packets that never taste quite right. I sat on the edge of the bed and called my son, who lives up in Vermont. He's 34, works in construction management, married with 2 girls. He's a good man. I don't say that because he's mine. I say it because I've watched him be a good man to people I've never met and will never know. "She asked you to leave your own house," he said, "for the weekend." "Dad, it's complicated." "It's really not." He wanted me to drive up to Vermont. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't want to pull him into the middle of something I didn't fully understand yet. That's always been my mistake, acting before I understood. Saying something in a moment of anger that cost me 6 months of goodwill. I'm 63 years old, and I'm still learning when to be quiet. I ordered a sandwich from the hotel restaurant and ate it at the desk, watching the news with the sound low. Some segment about the economy. Interest rates, something about the economy. Interest rates, something about housing costs. I turned it off before the weather. I slept better than I expected. Saturday morning, I drove to a diner I like about 4 miles from the hotel. Ruth's. It's been there since before my kids were born. Counter seats, booths with red vinyl, a woman named Carol who knows I take my coffee black and doesn't ask twice. I brought a crossword puzzle and sat there for 2 hours and felt, briefly, like a person with no particular obligations in the world. That feeling lasted until about 11:30 when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. Not the account my wife and I share. My personal account, the one I've had since before we were married, where my pension deposits and a small amount for my father's estate have been sitting quietly for the last 7 years. I don't touch it often. I use it for things that are mine. Hunting licenses, donations to the library, the occasional book. The notification said a new online banking profile had been created using my social security number. I read it 3 times. Then I called the bank. The woman who answered was professional and calm. She walked me through it. Someone had attempted to create a secondary profile linked to my account. They had my social security number. They had my date of birth. They had an old address, our address from before we moved in 2019. The attempt had been flagged automatically. Nothing had been transferred. But the profile had been created, and from it, someone had pulled my account summary. They knew the balance. "Do you know who may have had access to this information?" the woman asked. I was sitting in my truck in Ruth's parking lot. A couple walked past with a golden retriever. The dog looked happy. "I have some idea," I said. She told me to come into the branch when I could. She said she was flagging the account and that any further access attempts would be blocked. She said I should consider filing a report with the FTC and possibly local law enforcement. I thanked her. I sat in the truck for another 10 minutes. Then I called my attorney. His name is Gerald. We've been friends since our 40s. We used to coach Little League together, back when our boys were small. He became a real estate attorney, but he knows enough about everything else to be useful, and more importantly, he's discreet. He didn't pick up, so I left a message. Not frantic, just clear. I told him what happened and asked him to call me when he had a moment. Then I drove back to the hotel. The thing about being married for 31 years is that you accumulate a kind of archaeology of the other person. You know their patterns the way you know your own kitchen in the dark, where the counters are, where not to step. You know their tells. My wife's younger sister, I'll call her what she's always been to me, which is my sister-in-law, has never liked me. Not since the beginning. I don't say this with self-pity. It's simply true. I'm a quiet man, and quiet men make her nervous. She prefers people who perform their emotions visibly, who laugh loudly and argue openly and signal their allegiance in ways she can track. I was never that person, so she decided, somewhere in the first few years of our marriage, that quiet meant cold. Cold meant something was wrong with me. Over the years, she'd made comments. Little ones, mostly. Asides to my wife that my wife would later repeat, either not realizing how they landed or, and I've come to think this more lately, not caring. He doesn't seem very happy. Does he ever relax? I don't know how you deal with that. Christmas 2 years ago was different. She made a comment at the dinner table in front of her kids about the way I'd handled my mother's estate. Implied I'd been selfish, that I'd cut my wife out of decisions that affected them both. It wasn't true. My wife had been involved in every conversation, but my sister-in-law said it in that bright social tone she uses, the one that makes everything sound like a joke so there's no clean way to push back. I pushed back anyway. I wasn't loud. I didn't swear. I simply said, clearly and directly, that what she'd said was inaccurate and that I'd appreciate it if she corrected it in front of the same people she'd said it to. The table went silent. My brother-in-law looked at his plate. My wife looked at me like I'd done something unforgivable. My sister-in-law smiled and said, "Okay, I can see this is a sensitive subject." I never got my apology. I gave mine to keep the peace, which I've since decided was a kind of dishonesty I don't intend to repeat. So when I sat in that hotel room thinking about who had my social security number, who knew my old address, who had spent years watching the edges of my financial life and asking my wife small questions she probably answered without thinking, I had a direction to look. Gerald called me back Saturday evening. "You need to file a police report," he said right away. "No preamble, not tomorrow, today if they have a weekend line. You need a case number before anything else." You think this goes somewhere? What you're describing is federal, creating a fraudulent financial profile using someone else's identifying information. That's identity fraud. That's not a civil matter. That's criminal. You need to document that you acted quickly. My wife's family is at my house right now. Silence for a moment. Are you telling me you think the family visit and this are connected? I'm telling you. I'm not telling you that. He was quiet again. That's what I like about Gerald. He thinks before he speaks. "File the report tonight," he said. "Come to my office Monday morning, first thing. Don't discuss this with your wife until after you've talked to me." I filed the report that night. The officer who took it was young, couldn't have been more than 30, but he was thorough. He asked good questions. He told me an investigator would be in touch within 72 hours. He gave me a case number. I put the case number in my wallet. Then I ordered room service and watched a baseball game and slept the deep, untroubled sleep of a man who has done everything correctly that he can possibly do. Sunday afternoon, my wife texted me that her family had left and I could come home. I texted back, "I'll be home by 4. Not thank you, not can't wait. Just the fact of my arrival, like a weather report. When I pulled into the driveway, she was on the porch. She had that look she gets after her family visits. a kind of exhausted brightness, like someone who's been performing for 3 days and is relieved the audience is gone. She smiled when she saw me. "How was the hotel?" "Fine," I said. I carried my bag inside. She'd cleaned the house, made a pot of chili. She was being warm, the way she gets when she's trying to return things to normal after something uncomfortable. She asked about my weekend, and I told her I went to Ruth's, did a crossword, drove around a little. All of it true. She did not ask why I seemed quieter than usual. She didn't push. That evening, sitting at the kitchen table after dinner, she reached over and put her hand on mine. "I know it wasn't fair," she said, "asking you to leave. But you have to understand, with my sister, if you'd been here." "I do understand," I said, and I did. That was the problem. I understood exactly. I went to Gerald's office Monday morning at 8:30. He'd done some research over the weekend. The attempt on my account, as best he could piece together, had been initiated from a device in our area. The IP address the bank had flagged was local. Whoever did it hadn't used a VPN or taken any particular precautions. They'd been careless or confident, or both. "The question," Gerald said, "is what you want to do." "What are my options?" He laid them out methodically. I could let the investigation proceed on its own. The FTC report and police report were already moving through the system. I could push for a more active investigation by formally requesting the bank release the flagged IP data to law enforcement. I could also, separately, consult a family law attorney. "Family law?" I said. He looked at me steadily. "In the event this leads somewhere that affects your marriage, you want to know where you stand before it becomes urgent, not after." I sat with that. "Set the appointment," I said. I don't want to overstate what I was feeling in that moment. I wasn't angry, exactly. Anger would have been easier. What I felt was something quieter and more permanent. A kind of settling, like when you've been hearing a sound for so long you stopped noticing it, and then it stops, and suddenly the silence is so complete that you realize how much noise there had been. I had spent years making space for my wife's family's comfort, moving aside, staying quiet, absorbing the small slights so the weekend wouldn't turn into a thing. And somewhere in all that accommodating, someone in that family had looked at my accommodation and seen not kindness, but weakness, had thought, "He won't notice, he won't push back, he never does." They were wrong about that last part. The investigator called me Thursday morning. She was with the Financial Crimes Unit. Organized, professional. She spoke in the measured way people do when they've had the same conversation many times and have learned which words cause people to spiral. She told me the bank had cooperated fully. She told me the IP address had been traced. She gave me a name. It was my sister-in-law. I can't say I was surprised, but I want to be honest, hearing it still did something to me, because it meant my wife's family, the people she'd chosen over a quiet weekend with her husband, had sat in my house and eaten my food and looked at my things, and one of them had spent part of that time on a laptop trying to access my money. I asked the investigator what happened next. "We'll be making contact with the individual in question within the next few days," she said. "I'd advise you not to reach out to them directly or to any family members who might alert them before we do." "Understood," I said. I did not call my wife. She called me. It was a Friday morning, 12 days after she'd asked me to leave my own home. I was in the backyard with my coffee, watching a pair of cardinals argue over the bird feeder, when my phone rang. Her voice was not what I expected. I'd imagined she might be defensive, or confused, or performing some version of shock. Instead, she sounded small. The way she used to sound when the kids were sick. That particular fear that something has gotten out ahead of you, and you can't catch it. "An investigator came to my sister's house," she said, "this morning." "I know." A silence. "You knew this was happening." "I've known since Saturday," I said, "when the bank called me." "Why didn't you tell me?" I thought about how to answer that. I set my coffee mug down on the porch railing. A woodpecker started up somewhere in the tree line. "Because my attorney advised me not to," I said, and because I needed to know what I was dealing with before I decided what to do about it. What you're dealing with. Her voice changed slightly. This is my family, you know that. Your sister accessed my private financial account using my social security number, I said. She did it from my house, while I was at a hotel because you asked me to leave. I want you to understand that's what happened. She was quiet for a long time. I didn't know, she finally said. I want you to know I didn't know. I believe that, I said. And I did. My wife has many things she needs to work on, and I have mine, but dishonesty like that is not in her. But here's what I need you to understand. I've been quiet a long time about a lot of things, and I understand now that my silence got mistaken for something it wasn't. What do you mean? Your family thinks I'm someone who can be managed, moved around, asked to disappear when I'm inconvenient, and I let that happen for long enough that someone in your family decided it extended to my finances. That is now my sister made a terrible decision. I'm not defending that. I know you're not. I'm not asking you to. The Cardinals had settled their argument. One of them sat on the feeder, very still, very red. I'm asking you to understand what I'm doing now. I'm not doing it out of anger. I'm doing it because this is the correct response. What are you doing? I met with a family law attorney last week, I said. I've restructured my personal accounts. I've documented everything. I haven't made any decisions yet about what comes next for us, but I'm not going to sit in a hotel room and wait for things to go back to normal. Normal wasn't working. She said my name. Then she said it again, softer. I need you to come home, she said. We need to talk about this. I am home, I said. I've been home. I just wasn't wanted here. My son drove down from Vermont that weekend. I hadn't asked him to. He just showed up Saturday morning with a bag of groceries and made breakfast, the way his mother used to when the kids were small, and a big breakfast meant everything was going to be okay. We sat at the kitchen table for a long time, just the two of us, after my wife had gone to take a walk. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know yet, I said. I'm 63 years old. I'd like not to be hasty. He nodded. He didn't push. He got that from me, I think. The ability to sit in uncertainty without needing to fill it. She loves you, he said eventually, without needing to fill it. She loves you, he said eventually. I know she does. I know that too, but I looked out the kitchen window at the yard, at the bird feeder, which was empty now. I'd need to refill it. Love isn't always the question, I said. Sometimes the question is whether the people who love you have been paying attention. He didn't have an answer to that. Neither did I. But there's something about being 63 that allows you to sit with an open question without flinching. You've had enough time to learn that most things don't resolve cleanly, and that what looks like an ending is usually just the place where something slower and more important begins. My sister-in-law is facing a formal investigation. Her attorney has already made contact with mine. There will be consequences, and they will be handled through proper channels, without drama, without me raising my voice. My wife and I have started seeing a counselor. We go on Tuesday evenings. It's not comfortable. It's not supposed to be. I refilled the bird feeder on Sunday morning. Both cardinals came back within the hour. I stood at the window and watched them for a while. That's all. I just watched and let things be what they were and waited to see what came next. Some people would call that patience. At my age, I've started to think of it as something different, a kind of faith that if you do the right thing, quietly and completely, it eventually speaks for itself. I'm still deciding whether I believe that, but I haven't stopped watching.